The old envelope was the color of weak tea, its edges softened by 5 years of waiting in a dark drawer. Elias traced the sharp, definitive handwriting of his father-in-law, a man who had built a skyscraper with his will and communicated in clipped, final sentences. The words spoken at the wedding reception, a low rumble amidst the clinking of champagne glasses, were as clear now as they were then. Open this the day she gives up on you. A warning, a prophecy, a test. Elias had slid the letter into the pocket of his tuxedo, certain it was a relic he would never need, a strange heirloom from a man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. His Naima was not a liability. She was the anchor that had unexpectedly found his drifting ship. Now, at 2 in the morning, the silence of their house was a physical weight. In the next room, their daughter, Amara, slept, her small breaths a steady rhythm against the frantic pounding in his own chest. For weeks, Naima had been a ghost in their home, a beautiful, impeccably dressed ghost who moved through the rooms leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and a chill of unspoken distance. Her phone was a black mirror that held her gaze, her laptop a fortress. When he spoke, her answers were echoes from a great distance. I'm fine. Just tired. It's work you wouldn't understand. The last one was the blade that twisted. He had always understood. He understood the language of her silences, the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hand when she thought no one was watching. But this was different. This was a wall of polished glass, and he was on the outside looking in. She was retreating back into the world he had pulled her from, a world of cold precision and zero-sum games, a world where he, a simple logistics manager, had no place. He felt the creeping cold of invisibility. She wasn't seeing him anymore. She was looking straight through him. Her father's words echoed, "The day she gives up on you." Had that day arrived? Had it come not with a bang, but with the slow, agonizing fade of 1,000 missed dinners and 1,000,000 unanswered questions? His calloused hands, hands that could fix an engine or soothe a child's scraped knee, trembled as they held the fragile paper. He had promised himself he would never open it. It felt like a betrayal, a concession that the old man had been right, that their love was a fragile thing, unequal to the pressures of her world. But the silence in the house was louder than his pride. With a deep breath that did little to steady him, he slid a thumb under the sealed flap. The paper tore with a sound like a final whisper. From that moment, everything he thought he knew was about to be turned upside down. 6 years earlier, his world had been much smaller, contained within the four walls of a second-floor apartment in a quiet, historically black neighborhood in West Philadelphia. His life was a map of carefully plotted routines, each one designed to keep the world steady for his daughter, Amara. He rose before the sun, the sky outside his window a deep, bruised purple. The first sound was the hiss of the coffee maker, a prelude to the day. He would stand at the stove making oatmeal, his thoughts a quiet hum of logistics, port schedules, shipping containers, the delicate dance of getting things from one place to another. He was good at his job. He found a strange peace in its orderliness. Then, Amara would wake, a burst of sunshine in mismatched pajamas. She was 4 then, a whirlwind of energy and questions. Her natural hair, which he painstakingly tried to style into 2 neat puffs each morning, was a beautiful constellation of tight coils that seemed to have a life of their own. He was clumsy with the hair ties and the moisturizer, his large hands fumbling with a task that his late wife, Sarah, had made look as easy as breathing. Sarah. Her absence was not a gaping wound anymore, but a part of his landscape, like a phantom limb that ached when the weather changed. She had been gone for 3 years, taken by an illness that moved with swift, merciless efficiency. He channeled his grief into a fierce, unwavering devotion to the tiny, brilliant piece of her she had left behind. His days were measured in small acts of love, the careful packing of her lunchbox, with the crusts cut off her sandwich just the way she liked, the sound of the colorful beads on her braids clicking as she ran ahead of him to the daycare door, the worn feel of his work jacket, the one he had owned for a decade, a shield against the world. He was a tall black man who moved with a quiet economy of motion, his strength worn not as a threat, but as a comfort. He never asked for anything. He worked his shifts, paid his bills, and poured every remaining ounce of himself into being a father. He fixed leaky faucets, assembled furniture, and patched the knees of Amara's jeans. He was a man who fixed things. But the deep, hollow loneliness that settled in after Amara was asleep, that was something he did not know how to repair. He simply endured it for her. His life was about survival, not joy. He had forgotten what joy felt like. Miles away, in a glass tower that scraped the sky, Naima existed in a different universe. Her world was one of polished marble, hushed conference rooms, and the hum of immense, invisible power. As the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar development firm, she commanded armies of architects, lawyers, and financiers. Her deep brown skin was luminous, even under the harsh fluorescent lights of her office. Her natural hair always styled with intention, in an elegant updo that conveyed authority. She wore tailored suits like armor, her only jewelry a simple, expensive watch that measured her life in billable hours. She was brilliant, respected, and profoundly alone. Her success was a monument she had built brick by painstaking brick, a testament to her fierce intelligence and relentless drive. But it was a cold monument. Her father, a titan of industry himself, had taught her that love was conditional, a prize awarded for achievement. Aced exams, scholarships, promotions. These were the moments he had shown her something resembling affection. She had spent her entire life performing for an audience of one, chasing a validation that always remained just out of reach. She had never been loved simply for being. Her loneliness was a quiet, well-kept secret. She ate perfectly catered salads alone at her vast mahogany desk, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city she was helping to build. She saw thousands of lights, thousands of lives, and felt an impassable distance from all of them. She had attended galas, shaken hands with mayors, and graced the covers of business magazines. She had everything a person could want, and in the quiet moments when the phone stopped ringing, it all felt like a beautiful, empty room. The woman who could move markets and reshape skylines did not know how to ask for help, how to be vulnerable, how to simply rest. She was a powerhouse running on fumes, a queen ruling over a kingdom of solitude. She was trapped in the life she had fought so hard to create. Their worlds collided on a Tuesday in October, when the sky opened up and unleashed a storm of biblical proportions. Rain fell in solid, blinding sheets, and wind howled through the city, turning streets into rivers. The power grid, strained and overwhelmed, began to fail. In Naima's gleaming tower, the lights flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging the entire building into an eerie, oppressive darkness. The backup generators, designed to kick in seamlessly, failed to engage. The heart of her empire had stopped beating. She was stranded on the 50th floor, her phone battery draining, her connection to the world severed. Panic, an emotion she despised and rarely felt, began to prickle at the edges of her composure. A billion-dollar merger was hanging in the balance, and she was trapped in the dark. She descended the emergency stairwell, her heels clacking in the echoing silence, her voice sharp as she barked orders into her dying phone. Elias was on site because his logistics company held the emergency contract for the building. He was in the sub-basement, a labyrinth of pipes and concrete, wading through an inch of cold water, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. He and his team were working to manually override the failed system, a greasy, difficult job that required patience and skill. He was calm, focused, his voice a steady presence for his younger, more anxious colleagues. He was checking a circuit breaker panel in a service hallway when a figure emerged from the stairwell. It was Naima. She didn't see a man, a person. She saw an obstacle, a uniform. Her frustration, curdled by fear and helplessness, spilled out. "You!" she snapped, her voice accustomed to immediate obedience. "I need the power back on. Now. Do you have any idea what's at stake here?" Elias slowly straightened up. He was taller than her, his frame solid and grounded. He didn't flinch at her tone. He simply looked at her, his gaze taking in the faint tremor in her hands, the exhaustion etched around her eyes. He saw past the CEO. He saw a woman who was scared. His voice, when he spoke, was low and calm, a stark contrast to her frantic energy. "We're working on it, ma'am," he said. "The main transfer switch is flooded. I'm rerouting the secondary feed, but it's going to take some time." His competence was absolute, his demeanor unshakable. It disarmed her. He saw her shiver, the thin silk of her blouse no match for the damp chill of the basement. Without thinking, he unscrewed the cap of his worn metal thermos. The steam that escaped smelled of ginger and honey. "Here," he said, holding it out. "You look cold." Naima stared at the thermos as if it were a foreign object, a gift, an offer. No one had offered her simple, unconditional comfort in years. People gave her things, but always with an agenda. They wanted her money, her influence, her approval. This man, this working-class stranger in a dark hallway, wanted nothing. He was just being kind. The unexpectedness of it cracked something open inside her. She reached out and her manicured fingers brushed against his calloused ones as she took the cup. The warmth spread through her hands, up her arms, a slow melting tide against the ice that had encased her heart for so long. She drank the hot, sweet tea, and for the first time that day, she felt a flicker of hope. She looked at the quiet, tired black man whose dark brown skin seemed to absorb the gloom around them, and she saw a type of strength she had never known, the strength of stillness, of quiet decency. It took 2 days to fully restore power to the tower. For 48 hours, Elias and his team were a constant presence, their calm competence a reassuring hum in the background of Naima's corporate chaos. She found herself manufacturing reasons to go down to the lower levels, drawn by an invisible pull she didn't understand. She learned his name was Elias. She learned he had a daughter. She learned he spoke in short, grounded sentences, and that his smile, when it rarely appeared, was like a light turning on in a dark room. When the crisis was finally over and the building hummed with life again, Naima felt an unfamiliar pang of disappointment. She knew she had to thank him. Her default setting was transactional. She had her assistant draw up a check for a substantial bonus, a reward for his excellent service. She presented it to him herself, expecting gratitude. Elias looked at the envelope, then back at her. He shook his head gently. "Thank you, ma'am, but I can't accept that. I was just doing my job." He wasn't being proud or difficult. He was simply stating a fact. His work had its own integrity. It wasn't for sale. His refusal was like a puzzle she couldn't solve. He wanted nothing from her. It was the most unsettling and intriguing thing that had ever happened to her. Her curiosity got the better of her. In a move that flagrantly crossed professional boundaries, she had her HR department find his address. She told herself it was to send a proper thank you gift. She arrived at his apartment building in her chauffeured town car, holding a ridiculously expensive gift basket filled with artisanal cheeses and imported wines. It felt absurd the moment she stepped onto the modest, clean-smelling hallway. She knocked. The door was opened not by Elias, but by a tiny girl with bright, inquisitive eyes and beautiful coils of hair that bounced with excitement. The girl held a purple crayon in one hand. She looked up at Naima's severe suit and perfectly styled hair. "Are you the power lady?" she asked, her voice clear and high. Before Naima could answer, Elias appeared behind his daughter, a look of mortified surprise on his face. He was wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "Amara," he chided gently. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." But Amara was already pulling Naima inside. "Daddy's making stew. It's my favorite." The apartment was small, but it was filled with a warmth that Naima's sprawling penthouse had never known. The air smelled of onions and garlic and something sweet. The walls were covered in a gallery of a child's artwork, vibrant, joyful explosions of color. A stuffed butterfly sat on the arm of the worn but comfortable-looking sofa. It was a home. A real home. For the first time in her life, Naima felt the profound difference between a house and a home. That was the beginning. She started visiting, first with flimsy excuses, dropping off a book for Amara, asking Elias's advice on a minor repair at her own place. Soon, the pretexts fell away. She came because she wanted to. She came because in that small, warm apartment, she could breathe. She wasn't a CEO, she was just Naima. The bonding happened in a series of small, unforgettable moments. One Saturday morning, Elias, trying to impress her, attempted to make crepes from a complicated recipe he'd found online. He ended up with a pan of blackened, smoky discs. He was about to throw them away in disgust when Amara piped up, "Daddy's pancakes are always crispy." Naima let out a laugh, not a polite corporate chuckle, but a deep, genuine sound that surprised them both. They sat at the small kitchen table, slathering the burnt offerings with syrup and berries, and it was the most delicious meal Naima had ever tasted. The humor of the moment, the shared imperfection, was a balm to her soul. On quiet evenings, after Amara was tucked into bed, they would sit on his small balcony, the city lights a distant glitter. In the gentle darkness, their defenses crumbled. He told her about Sarah, his voice soft with the ache of memory, but free of bitterness. He spoke of her kindness, her laugh, the way she had loved Amara from the moment she knew she existed. He shared the quiet wound of his past, not for pity, but as a simple offering of truth. In turn, Naima found herself speaking of her own childhood, of a father who saw her as a stock to be managed, of a life spent climbing a ladder to nowhere. "I think," she whispered into the night, "I just wanted him to see me." Elias didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He just listened. And in his quiet, empathetic silence, she felt seen for the first time. The true turning point, the moment that realigned her entire world, came from Amara. The little girl had grown to adore Naima, following her around the apartment, showing her drawings, and braiding small, clumsy plaits into the ends of Naima's hair. One afternoon, Amara presented her with a new masterpiece. It was a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant, smiling sun. The grass was a furious green, the sky a serene blue. "This is my family," Amara announced, pointing with a crayon-stained finger. "That's Daddy. He's a tall black man with strong arms." She pointed to the tallest figure. "That's me. I'm a little black girl, and I have beads in my hair." She pointed to the smallest figure, who did indeed have little circles drawn on the ends of her braids. Then she pointed to the third figure, the one standing between them. This figure had a careful bun drawn on her head and was wearing a bright blue dress. "And this is you." Naima's breath caught in her throat. Amara had used a rich, brown crayon for the skin of all three figures. She had captured the truth of them with the simple, profound honesty of a child. Amara looked up at her, her gaze unnervingly perceptive. "You look like someone who needs a family," she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. A dam inside Naima broke. All the years of loneliness, of striving, of feeling utterly and completely alone washed over her. She couldn't speak. She mumbled a quick excuse and hurried to the bathroom, where she locked the door and sobbed, pressing a hand to her mouth to stifle the sound. They were not tears of sadness, but of a shattering, terrifying, beautiful relief. A 4-year-old child had just offered her the one thing she had always craved: unconditional belonging. In that moment, she knew she was irrevocably in love, not just with the quiet, kind man in the other room, but with the small, warm world he had built. 5 years later, that world had expanded. They were married, living in a house with a small yard in a leafy suburb. The house was bigger, but Elias and Amara had filled it with the same warmth as the old apartment. Amara's drawings still adorned the refrigerator, and the scent of Elias's cooking still filled the air. Naima had learned to leave her work at the office. She had learned to rest. She had learned what it felt like to be loved not for her accomplishments, but for herself. But the world she had left behind had a long memory and a powerful gravitational pull. A rival on her company's board, a slick, insecure man named Peterson, had never accepted her leadership. He saw her happiness, her newfound softness, as a weakness to be exploited. He began orchestrating a hostile takeover, a complex and vicious corporate maneuver designed to oust her. The pressure was immense, a suffocating weight that Naima had not felt in years. And under that weight, she began to revert. The old armor came out of storage. She started working 20-hour days, her mind a constant swirl of strategy and damage control. The controlled, precise ice queen of her former life re-emerged, pushing the softer, happier Naima aside. She became a ghost in their home again. She missed dinners. She canceled weekend plans. When Elias would try to pull her close at night, she would be stiff, her mind clearly miles away, crunching numbers and anticipating betrayals. "I have to handle this," she'd say, her voice clipped. "You wouldn't understand." The words were a defense mechanism, a way to shield him from the ugliness of her corporate battle. But to him, they felt like a dismissal, a door slamming shut. He felt the chasm opening between them, a silent, terrifying space. He would make her favorite meal, and she would call to say she was stuck in a meeting. He would leave a note on her pillow and find it untouched the next morning. He was losing her. The world of power and money, the world her father had forged her for, was reclaiming her. The most painful blow came from Amara, now 9, and just as perceptive as ever. One evening, as Elias was tucking her in, she asked, her voice small and worried, "Why is Mama sad like she was before she met us?" The innocent question was a dagger in his heart. He saw it then through his daughter's clear eyes. Naima wasn't just distant. She was unhappy. She was trapped again. And he, the man who could fix anything, had no idea how to reach her. He felt helpless. He felt erased. He truly, deeply believed that she had given up on their life, on him. The strain was too much. Their quiet, warm world was no match for the roaring fire of her ambition and the enemies it created. It was this belief, this heavy cloak of despair, that finally led him to the old, yellowed envelope in his drawer. He was back at the kitchen table, the torn envelope in one hand, the single sheet of crisp, expensive stationery in the other. He braced himself for the words, expecting a cold, cynical, "I told you so," a final testament to his father-in-law's belief that love was a poor investment, but the handwriting was not what he expected. It was a father's hand, not a CEO's. The words were simple, direct, and devastating in their insight. Elias, my daughter was taught that love is a transaction, that worth is measured in victory. I taught her that. It is my greatest regret. She doesn't know how to rest. She doesn't know how to accept help. When the walls are closing in, she will not reach for a hand. She will build a fortress and fight from within it, alone. She believes this is strength. When she pushes you away, it is not because she has given up on you. It is because she is terrified of failing you. She is not pushing you away. She is trying to protect you from the shrapnel of her own defeat. Don't let her fight alone. Go to her. The letter fell from his fingers. It was not a warning. It was a map, a key. Everything clicked into place. The distance, the clipped phrases, the sleepless nights. It wasn't rejection. It was a misguided act of protection. She wasn't abandoning him. She was trying to shield him from the battle she was convinced she would lose. And in his own pain, he had failed to see hers. A surge of adrenaline and purpose shot through him. He grabbed his keys and was out the door, the letter clutched in his hand. He drove through the sleeping suburbs and into the heart of the glittering, sleepless city. The lights were on in her office tower, a beacon on the 50th floor. The boardroom. He didn't bother with security, using the keycard Naima had given him years ago. He strode through the silent, empty office, his work boots making no sound on the plush carpet. He pushed open the heavy glass doors to the boardroom. She was there, at the head of the long, polished table. She looked smaller than he had ever seen her, cornered. Peterson was on his feet, a predatory smirk on his face, flanked by two other grim-faced board members. They were closing in for the kill. "Excuse me," Peterson said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a private meeting." Elias didn't even look at him. His eyes were only for Naima. He saw the flicker of shock in her gaze, followed by a wave of crushing weariness. He walked the length of the room, the space between them charged with 5 years of love and 3 weeks of misunderstanding. He stopped beside her chair and took her hand. His large, warm, dark hand completely enveloped her cold, trembling one. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice for her alone. "Come home." Tears instantly welled in Naima's eyes. She saw the letter in his other hand and understood everything. He knew. He saw her. He wasn't angry. He was here. He was her anchor. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a profound sense of peace. She stood up, her movements graceful and certain. She looked at Peterson, at the men who thought they had won, and her voice was not the voice of a defeated CEO, but of a free woman. "You can have the company," she said, her tone quiet but unshakable. She slid her corporate ID card off the lanyard around her neck and placed it gently on the table. The small piece of plastic landed with a soft, final click. "I'm choosing my family." Without another glance at the stunned faces of the board members, she let Elias lead her out of the room, out of the tower, out of the life that had almost cost her everything. The victory wasn't in keeping her throne. It was in having the courage to walk away from it. The drive home was silent, but it was a comfortable, healing silence. They held hands the entire way, a current of understanding flowing between them. When they got back to the house, the quiet felt different. It was no longer a wait but a sanctuary. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had opened the letter just an hour before. And then, the dam finally broke. Naima collapsed into his arms, her body racked with sobs of grief and relief. She told him everything: the pressure from the board, Peterson's relentless attacks, the bone-deep fear of losing it all and dragging him and Amara down into her failure. "I thought I was protecting you." She wept into his shoulder. "I didn't know how to tell you I was losing." Elias just held her, stroking her hair, his presence a solid, unmoving wall against her pain. "I see you," he murmured into her hair. The 4 simple words she had spent her entire life waiting to hear. "I've always seen you." The sound of small feet on the stairs made them both look up. Amara stood in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed butterfly, her eyes wide with sleep and concern. She took in the scene, her mother's tears, her father's protective embrace, with the quiet wisdom of a child who understands emotion better than most adults. She didn't speak. She walked over to them, her small arms reaching up to encircle both their necks, pulling them into a tight 3-person hug. She rested her head against Naima's. She looked up at her mother, her gaze direct and full of love. "Does that mean you're staying forever?" she asked, the question a perfect, hopeful prayer. Naima looked from her daughter's earnest face to her husband's steady eyes. A real smile, the first in weeks, broke through her tears. "Yes, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion but clear as a bell. "I'm staying forever." 6 months passed, and the seasons turned. The crispness of autumn gave way to the quiet blanket of winter, then melted into the vibrant promise of spring. Their life found a new, more authentic rhythm. Naima, free from the crushing weight of her corporate empire, was a different woman. The armor was gone, replaced by a soft, luminous strength. She had channeled her formidable skills and resources into creating a foundation that provided grants and mentorship to Black women starting their own businesses. She was working harder than ever, but it was work that filled her up instead of draining her. She glowed. One late afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, casting a golden, honeyed light across their backyard, the 3 of them were in the garden. It was their new ritual, their sanctuary. Naima, in old jeans and a simple t-shirt, had dirt smudged on her cheek, her natural hair free from its usual elegant bun. She was on her knees, gently pressing soil around a new rose bush, her touch tender and nurturing. Elias was nearby, planting rows of tomato seedlings, his movements practiced and sure. Amara, a whirlwind in a yellow dress, was chasing a monarch butterfly that danced just beyond her reach, her laughter carrying on the warm air. The scene was a portrait of ordinary, profound peace. Elias paused, leaning back on his heels, and just watched his wife. He watched the way the sunlight caught the rich, deep brown of her skin, the look of focused contentment on her face. His heart felt so full it ached. He had thought for a time that he had lost her to a world of glass and steel, but he realized now that he never had. Her heart had always been here, in the rich soil of their life together. He didn't have a diamond ring or a grand speech. He had something better. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old, worn letter from her father. It was creased and softened from being carried with him, a talisman. On the blank space at the bottom, below her father's words, he had written a few of his own. He walked over to her, his shadow falling gently over her. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun, a question in them. He simply handed her the letter, her brow furrowed in confusion as she took it, her dirt-stained fingers gentle on the fragile paper. She unfolded it and read her father's words, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. Then she saw the new inscription, Elias's familiar, steady handwriting just below. It said, "You never gave up on me. Will you keep not giving up on me forever?" She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. He saw his answer there, clear and bright. She didn't need to speak. She just nodded. A single, perfect tear breaking free and tracing a path through the smudge of dirt on her cheek. He reached out and gently wiped it away with his thumb, his touch as reverent as a prayer. And the narrator watched, knowing that love is not found in the grand victories or the gleaming towers of success. It is built in the quiet moments, in the shared silence of a garden at dusk, in the brave question of a child, in the courage to be seen not for what you have achieved, but for who you truly are. Family is not something you are born into, but a home you choose to build, one imperfect pancake, one whispered promise, one steady hand at a time. It is the quiet certainty that even when the world demands you be strong, there is a place, a person, a love that allows you finally to be safe